Every morning this week I have woken up and done this, just without a camera, gotten ready and just sat here. And either cried or had a stomachache or just have been unable to move. But yesterday I actually finally plucked up the courage to submit a grievance letter. It was 10 pages long and it was about an incident which happened last week on November 16th. And I guess it's bittersweet because on the sweet side, I actually stood up for myself and acknowledged what was going on without being intimidated. But the bitter side is that I can't continue at my job. And that's bitter because I love my colleagues and I love the people I work with, and I know that they, in their own ways, love and care about me, but sometimes it's just not worth it. I'm already 27 minutes late to work. Oh, right. But today is, in theory, my last day, and it's hard because although I've been treated so terribly by management, which I will go into when I'm a bit more put together, I love the people who I work with, and they mean the absolute world to me, and I was so proud to represent them in this role that I had as their representative, being able to go to these meetings and talk to management. But unfortunately, it doesn't matter how much you want to talk to management. If they don't want to talk to you, nothing's going to get done. Nobody should be subjected or made the victim of a bully or of bullying. Nobody should feel that they cannot go to work. They shouldn't fear retaliation or victimization when they go to a place of work where they're meant to feel safe, where they're meant to feel that when they go there, they are going to have a day which may have ups and downs, but which at the end of it, they know that the next day they can go back. When you don't feel that you can do that, when you know that you can't do that, that's not on you. That's on what's going on in that work environment, and that is not a place that you should be at. Oh, 4:37. Okay. I am very late. Very late. Should I stay or should I go? I'll just put some Dolly Parton on and we'll get going. We will get going. Number 1, you're a manager by choice. No one cares that you work 60 hours. The thing about being a manager or in charge of a retail branch is that you are a manager by choice. We as employees are not there necessarily by choice in the same sense that you are. So for instance, if you decide to step down as a manager because you find it too tiresome, too difficult, too stressful, you will, at the end of the day, still have a job as an employee, just like the rest of us. Whereas if we find our job stressful, tiring, exhausting, we don't have that option to just step down and still have a job and still get a paycheck. So please understand that when you tell us that you work harder than us, that you work 60 hours, that you have 45 children, and that you don't complain, and why should we complain? That really doesn't hit in the same way that I think you think it does. Don't threaten your employees. This is something that seems quite obvious, but isn't always obvious, as first-hand experience would show. My former employer, for instance, thought that it was apt to threaten me by bringing my private medical information into a professional context and conversation. She made it known that I had been absent due to my mental health, due to some personal things, which I haven't even relayed to my subscribers. And this was completely without my permission. This was intended to invalidate points that I was making about poor management. This manager decided to say that I could not know that management was poor because I wasn't there because of X, Y, and Z reason. And how then are you in the state of mind to tell us that we are bad at our job? Don't threaten and manipulate your employees. Just don't. Number 3, don't age discriminate. Hiring young, inexperienced, 20-year-old managers to manage a team of employees whose average age is 35 and above is not going to work. It's especially not going to work when the 20-year-old you hire is either your child, is a close family friend, is a favorite. It's just not going to work, especially when you have talent and potential in your existing employee group. It's a tale as old as time that favoritism may work in the short term in terms of being perky for the managers in charge, but in the long term it harms the business as a whole. And unfortunately, I find that a lot of managers in retail and in the service industries do not appreciate this fact because they tend to be trying to make it as easy and as comfortable and as power secure for themselves as possible, to the detriment of the business as a whole and to the detriment of retaining and attracting staff who are actually good and positive for the business. This happened in my former job, in which my management was composed almost entirely of people who were favorites. And that meant that a lot of things were overlooked. In this, your staff no longer respect management, they no longer trust management, and ultimately you're going to lose them, or they're not going to put in the effort because what is the point? Although not universally the case, oftentimes maturity and wisdom comes with age, because with age comes experience. Number 4, don't discard talent or take it for granted. At my old job, I definitely was not a favorite. I was shouted at or told off severely at least twice a week for things that were just nonsensical, but according to management and their true vendetta against me at times, it made sense to them. When I, for instance, got told off because I went to a colleague and asked if he was okay in the morning, a morning in which he'd found out that both of his parents had contracted the big Rona, I was told off and I was given a written warning because I was talking to a staff member who was crying and should not have been there, when nobody in management had bothered to ask this person how they were doing, what they could do, etc. Number 5, don't be racist. Just because I'm black, it doesn't mean that you can call me a liar. It doesn't mean that you can smirk at me. It doesn't mean that you can talk slowly at me because apparently I don't understand that you are in charge and I am not. It also doesn't mean that you can shout at me. It doesn't mean that you can treat me differently to other members of staff. It doesn't mean that you can make me a representative of my colleagues just because it will add to the diversity and inclusion which our store and retail in general needs. It doesn't mean that when you realize you have been racist, you can then go to one of the 3 other black people who work in our store of over 150 people and tell them that you will give them sabbatical leave, literal sabbatical leave, paid leave, if they agree not to leave, because that would look bad. I'm just letting that marinate a bit, because that's just such an interesting way of going about business. Number 6, take criticism and learn from it. The brilliant thing about business is that it is not meant to be personal. So when I critique your managerial approach and style, that's not an affront or an attack on you personally. That is an attack on how you have interpreted the role which you perform in the public realm of business and retail and service. Remember, nothing is personal in the professional space unless you make it so. Once you make things personal, that's when people get hurt, and that's when employees don't want to work for you or with you. Number 7, you are only as powerful as you think. And I mean this quite literally. All power is in your head. It ain't real. Seriously. As a manager, you are like a parent in the 21st century. You have to convince your child to listen to you. You have to negotiate with them. You have to earn their respect. Just because they emerged from your loins, it does not mean that you, therefore, have complete and utter and absolute unquestionable authority and power over them. It is not enough to say, because I said so, for them to actually listen to you. When your employees come to you with their queries, with their concerns, it isn't your responsibility to tell them to get back to work. It isn't your responsibility to just hand it over to someone else. It's your responsibility to respect the fact that you have to take responsibility for your employees in every aspect of the word, whether you want to or not. That is the beauty of your job title. And finally, number 8, remember that it's individual human beings who work for you, not Tesla bots, yet. The people who work for you are made of bones, of blood, tissue and mucus. We have brains and hormones which influence how we perceive the world. We age, we get sick, we have moods, and we get stressed and have our sanity impacted daily. This sanity is impacted by a rather perplexing and not so effervescent modern world. Consider this before trying to publicly humiliate and bully your employees. And remember that you are equals in everything, except in having a superficial title and job description, which has merely provided you access to a higher paycheck and bonus. And with that privilege comes additional responsibility and added expectations, which it is wholly justifiable of those working for you to routinely expect of you. Salutations. Firstly, I would just like to apologize sincerely for my absence and completely unacceptable schedule these past few weeks. I'm afraid I've been trying to process what has just happened, and I've been involved in a formal process, grievance procedure regarding what has recently happened. And that has really taken a lot out of me, sort of mentally, in terms of figuring out what I'm going to do all of a sudden, in which I very much on a whim decided to quit my job in the middle of a meeting in which my former employer and boss was bullying me and racially discriminating against me, and I was in quite an emotional state. I quit, and that was that. It's been a lot, but thankfully I feel a lot better now, and I feel that I can get back into doing more regular YouTube content and just being fully on this and on finding a new job. So thank you for your patience, And I thought, in the spirit of me currently being unemployed and figuring out exactly what I want to do with the future, and sort of having this, I would see it as an advantageous position, which I find myself in right now, in being able to actually think about what I'm going to do and not having to worry about my rent for the next 2 months, that I would just do a video about why I quit, what led to me quitting, and sort of the wider societal and contextual aspects of it, particularly as today we are allegedly, according to many newspapers, going through what is being dubbed the Great Resignation. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about that, and just wanted to potentially give some indirect advice on quitting your job or staying in your job, and sort of the economic climate which we find ourselves in, primarily in the Anglo-American world. So for those of you who don't know, I used to work at a grocery store, a very prestigious grocery store, quite high-end, very much catering toward the upper middle class, the middle to upper middle class and beyond. I actually, ironically, irrespective of my background in academia, loved my job. I've been working there for just under 3 years at this point, and I had really found meaning in my job because I had not been able to find that sort of place and that sense of belonging in academia. I think that's because the academic institution which I found myself in and the environment I found myself in, which was very whitewashed and very Eurocentric, did not have a space for me and did not take me very seriously. And a consequence of that was that I ultimately gave up on that venture. I suddenly found myself without any direction, without any purpose, and I just applied for jobs. I was rejected from every single job that I applied to, and that was to be expected, I believe, because I did not have any additional experience. One thing that I didn't do, which I regret not doing, but also I found myself in a position that I couldn't do it, was doing internships and work experience during the holiday period. I didn't have, for instance, a family that I could go home to during the holiday and from there use my money to go to internships. I lived at my university's college for the entirety of my time there, and for that reason, I therefore didn't have the money or the disposable income to even get a train into the big cities, into London, to do an internship. And that was fine with me because I was set on academia. But in retrospect, in terms of looking for alternatives and inevitably competing with other people in the workforce, I was definitely very, very low on the list. So it was to be expected, and so I take full responsibility for that fact. The only and the first job offer which I got was, and because of that, I immediately found myself very loyal to the company and to the brand because I got this job, and I immediately felt as if I had joined a family. And I don't mean this in a positive, warm, happy-go-lucky sort of way. I mean this purely in a way of a literal family, as in you join a group of people whom you had no say in the matter of joining or being a part of. And you have to stick together through thick and thin, whether you want to or don't want to, whether you like each other or don't like each other. And we had to learn to work together. We had to learn to, in a sense, like, and thankfully in a lot of cases, love each other. The thing about it is that because it is such an old business, it's very much ingrained in British traditionalism, and a lot of the appeal of is that it attracts older generations, particularly boomers, and it's very loyal to the idea of only selling British meat British produce, of supporting Britain, being very patriotic. We have minutes of silence on Remembrance Day, that sort of thing. And I could see the appeal. The appeal was definitely that they had very loyal customers, and that the loyalty from their customers stemmed from the fact that it felt very homely, that it seemingly didn't change, and that it was not as obsessed with connecting to the modern world. We had tills where we would actually sit down and were encouraged to talk to customers, to get to know them by name. And we would. And self-service tills, there were about 3 when I started there in this whole store, like a very big store. And the majority of tills were sit-down tills where you would sit and engage with the customers. And I know, I would say, a good 100 customers by name who come in regularly, who I have formed relationships with. And that's very unique in retail, particularly in modern retail. The thing that I really loved about this was this fact. And this was also a fact which coincidentally resulted in quite a loyal workforce. I found it quite remarkable because we were all multi-generational. There was obviously inevitably a lot of gossip, a lot of fighting, a lot of misinterpretation, and everything that you'd expect from a crazy family get-together that happens once every few months. I think because we were all on the same wavelength, we all were doing the same work, we were all paid the same. There was this sense of very hardcore egalitarianism among us. And there are advantages in this, but there are also considerable disadvantages in this, in that we were always, irrespective of being a team, competing with each other to see who could work more. It was seen as a failing on your part if you called in sick. It was at times quite difficult to actually really get out of this role, as in any family in which you are given a role which you have to fulfill and you have to play, and there are certain rules in place, and that is how it is. And so I did find myself inevitably playing a role. But I think in any social context, you're given a role that you have to play. And I was quite content with my role. And for the first, I would say, year and a half, I was pretty happy at my job. I felt that I could actually really connect with people in a way that I had not done outside of the academic context. And it was also very fascinating being in this city that I live in, Cambridge, in which I'd lived here as a student for 3 to 4 years, which was so different to actually living here as a local and working here as a local. And the disparity between students and the locals has really opened my eyes to inequality in the modern age. People have had to leave their job at have had to look elsewhere, have had to even move from Cambridge, where they've lived all their lives, just because they can't actually afford to live here, because companies are not offering them a proportional living wage. I could not imagine having a family and living on my salary. I barely get by with my salary just being for me, and having a family to support on that is just absolutely unbelievable.
Do you like your job?
Another 4.2 million people quit their jobs in October as the number of people who are voluntarily leaving work continues at near record levels.
People are taking time to reevaluate what they want to do with their lives and what work actually means to them.
Vietnam's garment factory workers, for example, they traded poor living conditions and human rights abuses in the factories for a life of struggle at home.
A lot of people are quitting their jobs. They've experienced burnout during the pandemic, or they're just looking for different opportunities.
At least there, they have family.
If you're seeing workers switch from one industry to another,
okay, this actually isn't going to make me happy.
It's oftentimes because they can get better pay or better working conditions in the industry that they're transitioning to.
It's a legacy of the pandemic. It gave people a newfound respect for themselves and their life.
Others are concerned that labor shortages reflect longer-term shifts away from the workforce that won't reverse, meaning some of these industries could be faced with long-lasting changes.
Weekly unemployment claims hit a stunning new high today, with 6.6 million Americans filing just last week.
Through the pandemic, people have realized that having an environment that makes them happy and fulfilled in their life is really important.
Working in retail, it is typically a very high turnover job, but I think right now a lot of people working in retail, working in service sector jobs, working directly with the public at its worst generally, are actually taking an indirect stand or are taking their grievances to social media in a far more consensual and camaraderie sense of the word. The service sector and retail are obviously transforming at a rapid rate due to the fact that people are not leaving their homes as much as they were. People are not going on holiday, are not vacating. And because of this, there's just a sense of, and literally, far more job openings. And when there are far more job openings, particularly in such precarious sectors of the modern market and workforce, people are more enthused and are more willing to quit and to try something new. And I think that was what I had in the back of my mind when I so impulsively just quit in that meeting. And I think it is just because we want to be treated like human beings. And hopefully with what is being said, with the conversations that are being had, employers will actually look at how they've been treating their employees, will look at how they can better treat their employees, and also actually take the risk, the same risk as many employees are taking in leaving their jobs or in seeking better treatment, and actually really shake up the place of work which they have dominion over and do something for the good of the people working there. Sometimes you need to think about people before you think about money in order to make money. Who would have thought?